change, 'cause it's gonna come, yeah, it's gonna come.
Exactly. Everybody, welcome to the Revolution and Beer Show. We're already talking beer. Welcome back. Last week we had a really good discussion about the IVAW.
Yeah. Rock Veterans Against
Vince,
the War.
welcome
Vince
back.
here.
Thanks for having me.
So we wanted to continue that conversation, but we wanted to take it into a little bit different direction here, and we wanted to talk about something that we've been discussing, and I know you guys have been talking about a little bit, is about the growing militarism in the United States.
That has a lot to do with, everyone hears of this term climate change, climate shift, global weirding, global warming, whatever you want to call it. And then you also have the sort of slash and burn, destroy and rebuild economic policies that are often backed by these trade agreements that we keep cranking out. And I think we want to get into a discussion with Vince a little bit about where that's going, because turns out that it's going in a particular direction, and if we don't kind of get on top of this and understand what it means, we might be in for a bit of a nasty surprise.
Yeah. So we're here at the Elbo Room in Lakeview. I've been duly corrected.
It's all right. We're gonna post a neighborhood map up back there in the
2870 North
off
North Lincoln Avenue. We're enjoying some really good local beer, a Chicago beer.
And I'm not even from
Chicago. And I know we don't advertise, we can't advertise on the show, but we're really liking this by Beguile Brewery.
Yeah. Up in Ravenswood.
Up in Ravenswood, and they're really doing some nice stuff. We did the IPA.
A couple times.
Haphazardly, I believe it was. And then this one is is an artesian pale white ale.
Wheat ale. Yep.
Wheat ale, yeah.
We're rounding that one out.
And it's really nice, a little hoppy, which we enjoy. So it was a nice dovetail from the IPA. And
it's smoother than the IPA for sure. Yeah.
It is smoother than the IPA, and I think there's a little bit stronger depth of character. But for an IPA, they did it right on the other one.
Yeah, there's a definitive taste to that. It's got a good punch. It's good.
And Vince actually is going to a wedding. So we're gonna he really enjoyed the IPA. We're gonna pass that over to him, and he can enjoy that at the wedding. And if I could just say a toast, guys.
Salud.
Welcome back to the show.
Toast, salud.
Cheers. Narok in Romanian, Jivuli in Bosnia.
What's toast in Arabic?
Prost in what's toast in Arabic?
You might know.
Ooh, I couldn't tell you that one.
Something we got to learn.
But it all, yeah. I was going to say it would depend as well, because of course in some of the different religious cultures, there's no. I mean, there would be a toast, but not in the alcohol context.
Right.
So yeah, that's
greeting
interesting. But the interesting thing is, in Iraq,
to life maybe.
the first thing they do is offer you a drink. And it doesn't matter if you walk into the poorest neighborhood or the most well-off neighborhood.
Yeah.
If all they have is a glass of water to give you, the first thing they will give you is a glass of water.
Yeah.
Is immediate.
It's the same across. I found in Southern Europe, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Romania, same exact thing. They just drink a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
So, which was a wonderful thing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for returning to the show. We're going to get to this topic in a minute. What I would like to say is stay tuned for the end of the show. We're gonna have some information on our guest. On the IVAW, Iraq Veterans Against the War at IVAW.org. Also, you can find out all about us, get those contacts as well at Revolution and Beer, revolutionandbeer.com. And then check us out, like us on the Facebook, where we're posting constantly. So there'll be unique content to our webpage.
Yeah, it all kind of spins off the webpage, though.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have some fun with maps on this.
But I think some of those quicker update things and a lot of the activist calendar issues show up on our Facebook, more quickly.
And from time to time, if it's cool with the venue that we're shooting at, we'll put out an invite for you to come and hang out and be in the crowd, or have a beer and shout your ideas over the shoulder as we're taping, and you'll be able to find that kind of stuff out over on Facebook.
Precisely.
Our director is waving his head. No. But
Which brings me to this. I'd like to make a toast to Ben Houston and his wife Jenna, who have just had, as of the airing of this show,
Stan
the man. There's their new child.
Cheers.
There you go.
Salute.
So cheers to those guys. The other thing I want to bring up, we are capably taken care of here by our bartender Saul.
yes.
And we were talking about tipping. Tip your bartenders, and
Always
this
tip
is
your bartender.
this is the template that I use. First of all, and you've worked in restaurants.
Yes,
you
I
know
have.
We're going to do an exclusive about this
We're
topic.
going to do an
specifically.
I've bartended at a million
Starring
places.
Saul.
So this is a template I use. If you're not sure how much to tip, figure out how much you're going to drink, and then tip on that at the beginning, and then every time you come back for a round, throw down $1.
There you go.
You know, that'll keep that bartender coming back to you. So that template has never failed me. It's never failed to pay my rent, but it's never failed for me to get a drink either. So, all right. So into the topic.
It's getting competitive out there.
It's getting competitive out there. But they work hard. The bartenders work hard. I know, you know, working long shifts, bartending, I've come home exhausted. So they're earning that money, and if you want to have a nice night, get those drinks in a reasonable amount of time, tip. Okay, so we wanted to talk about militarism in
Everywhere.
in this society, but in America,
home,
and
and
how
abroad.
it's kind of encroaching upon the culture, almost unseen. One of the things I brought up to Brian in our discussion before the show was a new commercial I've been hearing the last several weeks
Yeah.
by about the National Guard, which seems rather benign. But in that commercial, they talk about policing,
Sure.
disasters, and the environment. Which again sounds rather benign, but now we've got a militarism of everything, including natural disasters, natural issues like chemical cleanups.
Wait. Global warming is supposed to be a myth.
Well,
So
that's
why
right.
is the National Guard talking
Well,
about the environment as you know, one
on
of
a,
those things that they?
You know, on a side
can't
note,
take
on
it.
a side note, the Pentagon did pull together and continues to pull together plans for issues, international and national issues relating to global warming.
Right.
But this is something that the IVAW is also has also been addressing a little bit. Is the militarism of the police force, of the culture. Speak a little bit about that.
Well, let me tie this into our national convention we just had in Chicago. So as Brian and I were talking about earlier, we invited both Christian Parenti to come out and Nick Terse.
Yeah.
For the sake of time, Christian Parenti's latest book is called The Tropic of Chaos. What he's calling the catastrophic convergence, it obtains three different sort of elements. On one end, it's Cold War weaponry left from the Cold War. So what he calls Cold War militarism. This is access to RPGs, access to Kalashnikovs, so on and so forth. Now, on the other end would be neoliberal economic reforms for the last 30, 40 years, particularly in the global south, vis-a-vis the World Bank, IMF, so forth.
Right.
The third of what would complete his catastrophic convergence would be those two things taking place in the context of runaway climate change.
Yeah.
So now he uses, let me use an example that he would use, which is Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, for example, they are, much like Syria, under the worst drought in recorded history, one of the worst in the Fertile Crescent's history, so on and so forth. Because of that, it takes 1/5 to 1/6 of the water to grow poppy as it does traditional crops. So in the context of being in that drought, how does that manifest in political, cultural situations? It manifests itself in growing poppy instead of growing wheat.
And we have Texas that's running a number of, municipalities. Easy for me to say. Municipalities in Texas that are running out or about to run out of water.
Well, and how does all that tie together? What are they using the water for? As what the gentleman from Gasland 2 just pointed out, the vast majority of the water that's being pumped out of there isn't actually being used for municipal purposes. It's being used for fracking. So when we talk about fresh water, we should also be very clear. Fresh water, 60% of which is being used by industry, mostly industrial industries, another 40% by industrial agriculture, the other 10% by municipalities, half of that 10%, 5% is for golf courses and public parks, the other 5% actually for households.
So that's a very small percentage.
George Carlin had a very interesting take on how to solve the homing problem, or the housing problem for the homeless, which was build it on golf courses.
I like
that.
that.
Cemeteries too in there somewhere, but golf courses first, because that's my vote.
But there's a militaristic trajectory here.
Well, and the problem is, there's twofold problem here. Number one, the militarism is inherent to exacerbating the climate change. So in other words, what is the United States empire there for? In a large part, post-1979, the fall of the Shah, so on, protecting oil fields, protecting oil markets, and so forth, knowing that fossil fuels are exacerbating the greenhouse effect and causing this global warming. Okay, so that's one end of it. So that's the irony. The ultimate irony is that the very mechanism by which they're going to use to try and combat the social and economic consequences from global warming is the same mechanism that's also inherent to creating the global warming. So their response, as the old saying goes, when
chasing their tail.
Well, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail as well. When you're the United States empire and you have the largest, most sophisticated, brutal, sort of technologically advanced military apparatus the world has ever seen, when situations like global warming or refugees because of global warming, water shortages, food shortages come up, the answer is going to be to apply counterinsurgency tactics and ideologies that were practiced in Iraq and Afghanistan, but now in a different context, in the context of global warming.
So let's get into that a little bit. Counterinsurgency tactics, as applied in Iraq and Afghanistan. How has modern warfare shifted? We've seen a lot of differentiation. We used to go through trench warfare and all these other things, and I think, to a certain degree, it might not be inappropriate to say that the tactics and philosophies of military thinking, military intervention have almost been like masked. It's sort of like pushed out into the ethos to where we don't even see them or think about them anymore. There's been a major shift in the way that the United States is carrying out military interventions.
Technology has driven that as well.
Yeah.
Technology has driven that, although I will say, as I think any good folks who are interested in history and so forth, Alfred McCoy, historian from the University of Madison, wrote about the heroin trade in Vietnam and so forth. What he writes about is that many of these tactics and strategies and ideas around counterinsurgency, actually you can go back to the Philippines and the Spanish-American War. So you can go back almost 115 years now and look at some of the same strategies and tactics that were being used in that context, then being transferred to Korea, then being transferred to South America, to Southeast Asia, to Central America in the 1980s, vis-a-vis the School of Americas. Now, of course, with the global war on terror. So in some ways, the counterinsurgency doctrine is different than like traditional warfare, empires fighting, one battle line, another battle line.
That counterinsurgency strategy, though, is now part of policing in America.
Yes, I actually just had a debate on Jerome McDonald's Worldview program on NPR a few months ago with a gentleman from Northwestern University who's advocating that the way we deal with crime in the city of Chicago is to apply the counterinsurgency doctrines of Iraq and Afghanistan, teach the police. Now, this is a gentleman, again, from Northwestern University, not some hack from some whatever. I mean, an establishment person, very well thought out, very intelligent, articulate, and so forth, not a reactionary. His thinking is that they want to take the counterinsurgency strategies, tactics, and lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan and apply them in the context of crime.
I would propose that his thinking is to treat the symptom and not the cause, which is something that we always seem to struggle with in this country. But the war on drugs makes a lot of money. So anyway, that's.
I was going to say the technical side, though, is also important. So the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is commonly referred to as DARPA, DARPA actually released a report, and they released quadrennial reports on climate issues, new security issues, what their vision is for the future. Part of what they had mentioned was that by 2025, with the advent of drones and different, what they call autonomous mechanized robots systems, not just drones.
Now they want to use the word autonomous. Okay.
Well, and So this is what they're planning for by 2025. DARPA suggests that maybe half of the Army's forces will be roboticized. What will that do? Well, it performs a couple functions. Number one, there's a lot of, you don't have to pay for healthcare, you don't have to pay salaries for
Removes
robots.
the humanity from the
Well,
air to kill
and that
them.
was going to be my second point. The
Yeah.
second point is, once you remove humanity, once you remove the risk of one of your people being killed in combat operations instead of simply a drone being crashed to the ground, I think it opens up an avenue that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because now you're not just talking about the how of fighting wars, you're talking about the who. So,
Yes.
yes, the nuclear weapon changed
Yeah.
everything, but it was how you were fighting wars.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about who is fighting wars. If you have autonomous robots, so in the context of, say, developments in nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, places like Cal
Analytics,
Berkeley, Bionics,
algorithms also,
Stanford, UCLA, MIT, these are institutions who large portion of their funding, of course, is coming from the Department of Defense, coming from the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So some of the best scientists, some of the best engineers in the world.
Much of it from the tax base.
Well, all of us, sure, it's all coming
Yeah.
from us. But I mean,
Werner von Braun was brilliant, but he invented bombs.
right. No, it's a perfect example. I mean, so this is the future of warfare. Let me just give you a couple of statistics. When the war started in Iraq, we had a dozen drones flying in Iraqi airspace. By 2010, we had over 3,500 drones who'd flown over Iraqi airspace. It's just in the course of 6 years, 7 years. We now see the Houston Police Department, the LA Police Department, the Miami Police Department, all using drones. Of course, not weaponized. They're not killing people with them yet, but what they're using them for. And, it's interesting, you brought up immigration.
Yeah.
The pretext for them is that the militarization of the border is going to be vis-a-vis because of the immigration problem. Their justification is we're going to use drones to patrol the border, while we all know, of course, this will be used domestically to spy on people, so on. It'll expand.
Well, they're
from
also.
whatever,
I just saw. It must have been a report last night or the night before. It was talking about the arming of domestic, surveillance drones with non-lethal weaponry. I mean, all right. So this is coming, people. Like, seriously, we got to think about this. If you're not aware of it and you're not having conversations about it, and you're not engaged with your, representatives about it, like, this is the future. It's happening, and we already have a tech divide in this country related to our ability to use a computer or access information. We're about to step way above that and go to a technological divide as far as the understanding of what means are used to control and or attack.
Well, even on a more personal level, we saw in Boston with the manhunt for the Tsarnaev brother, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, that the police and people allowed this. They accepted this, and even as much as I like Amy Goodman on democracy now, she didn't have a single criticism of this, of the police going door to door, pulling people out of their homes and searching every single home for one person, which seemed to me to be devastating to the civil rights, to our civil rights. So,
and if we come to accept that as the way that it should be, then we have to, reassess what
it's that
what our rights are
which
and
you
how
prefer.
we
Do you
see our
want
society.
you want freedom or protection?
Like you get,
and what are you willing to sacrifice?
Like you have
in
to
order
choose
to be,
between freedom and safety.
Exactly.
Right.
So what is the IVAW? What is their position? What is their solution? Or what is their recommendation on avoiding this pitfall?
Well, if we're talking specifically in the context, I think I'm going to try and stay on track here.
It.
Within the context
I am not.
Within the context of global warming, I think what many of our members understand is that there can be many different responses. That isn't to negate because we're not a pacifist organization, which I also think lends a level of credibility to IVAW in a way that it does in other organizations who just say, well, all police, all security is bad. Here's the reason
You guys are warriors. You've been
the
through
reason
it.
we had somebody like Christian Parenti on the program, and the reason why we respect someone like Chris Hedges so much is because both of these people have been in half of the world's failed states. Okay, so between Christian Parenti and Chris Hedges, they've been to about 30 of what is considered 50, maybe 40 or 50 failed states in the world. because they have that context, they understand that there is also a need for security, order, police,
Precisely.
so on and so forth. People who have been in those situations, I think, truly understand that you have to have. I know it sounds terrible. I know my anarchist friends are going to watch this and like want to like throw stuff at the screen. Without some kind of a policing apparatus, I saw what that looks like in real time. So not theory, but what it looked like in Iraq. What Iraq looked like without a police force. What does Bosnia look like without a police force? What does it look like without a central government or without somebody who has some kind of credibility, can codify laws, can codify civil liberties?
There needs to be some apparatus in place
Well,
to protect human rights, but also protect the innocent.
And I will say, just on behalf of our anarchist friends out there that might be watching and thinking that we have had way too much to drink, which maybe we have, is that the difference between a radical approach to solving a problem and other ideas of solving a problem. It's that Band-Aid on cancer kind of situation. So yes, I mean you can say. I've faced down lawlessness in a foreign land that, and it was pure chaos, and no doubt it totally was. But I think that for anarchists and libertarians, real libertarians, that it's a broader question of what conditions led to that circumstance in the first place, and how do we address
all agree.
So I just
for the
same people that we're thinking about, I just want to throw that out there.
No, absolutely.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Brian's last show. So
I knew I was gonna blow it.
No, and I mean, believe me, here, see, this is where we totally. I mean, in Parenti's a Marxist. Parenti was trained under David Harvey. He was trained under Neil Smith at the London School of Economics. He comes from a strictly Marxist background. But what he would say is that yes, understanding that capitalism, contradictions in labor markets, exploitation of labor, blah blah. He understands all of that. I mean, so for him, and I think for where IVAW is coming from, we're saying. Yes, we understand that this is dealing with the symptoms and so forth, but what we are seeing right now is a shift from simply dealing with these economic and environmental issues in a political sense to now shifting them to the responsibility into the lane of the militarism, to the U.S. empire,
again, as you said,
military.
the singular focus of every problem is solved with a hammer.
Right. Yeah. And what the context? The context is Afghanistan going through the worst drought in recorded history. I mean, this is also what to bring it up to date for people, and I know this will air after these events probably have finished themselves off, or, Miley Cyrus will be the big news story in a couple months. It won't be Syria. Nonetheless,
we can only hope.
So I mean,
she hasn't even gotten started yet, folks.
I think some of what we're trying to figure out as an organization, even in the context of Syria, we're thinking to ourselves, wait a minute. Like from what we're reading, you've got the worst drought in recorded history again. You got 60% of their land that you can't even farm on. In the northeastern portion of the country, as we were talking about earlier, you've got 85% total livestock loss. You've got 75% total crop loss for farmers. You're dealing with 290% inflation since 2011. You're dealing with 60% unemployment. So I guess for us as in IVAW, while we understand that there's a need for security apparatuses and so forth, in order to not just address those symptoms that Brian's mentioning, we're asking ourselves, what are actually the causes of this? So in other words, is a missile strike going to solve 290% inflation? Is a missile strike going to solve or help solve 60% of the nation being in drought? Although that's what we're, like now it's being proposed, same thing in Chicago. It's not talking about jobs. People are mentioning, hey, why is there crime? Why are there shootings in the city? Let's deal with this by giving people living wage jobs with benefits, access to education, healthcare, and so forth. It's how many more police can we put on the street? Now, I have to say though that in some African American communities, it runs counter to the leftist narrative that all cops are bad. We don't want cops. If you go into some black communities in Chicago, they'll tell you, hey, actually, we do want cops, but we want the cops in conjunction with living wage jobs, access to health care, so on and so forth. So I just think it's very nuanced, and I think the issue for us is going to be as an organization, how do we deal with the context of runaway global warming? You've got people like James Hansen, former top climate scientist of NASA, just quit NASA after 35 years of working for NASA and said, hey, look, I'm going to be a full-time activist organizer. This is, for many of our members and as our organization, the context that we're trying to sort of, how do we deal with, how do we look at these issues in the future within the context
Yeah.
of global warming. And this is a huge thing that I don't think many other organizations or entities are trying to sort of grapple with.
No,
you
it's
know,
fa-
understanding.
it's-
And I don't mean
yeah.
to say that like in some pompous way. I'm just saying I
not at
think
all.
it's a real conversation that
Yeah.
like the anti-war movement is not having. And if we're having it, it's either simplistic like, oh, it's all bad, or it's, you know, it's fine and this
Yeah.
or that. I just think that there's a lot of room in there to have a
Well,
real conversation.
to
But
bring-
I'm sorry, real quick. Well, I think we get polarized into these solutions that are based upon partisanship rather than truly. And we're coming up to the last couple of minutes here. Rather than truly finding broader based solutions to complex issues, the hope issue, the job issue,
Let's also differentiate between broader, as in like, you know, national policy versus broader, as in a diversity of tactics. You know, perhaps, or you know, encompassing ideas of focusing on local economic issues and taking care of your own and your community, and that bolsters the power of the nation, or you know, a larger community or a state or whatever. Like that's because I think there's a lot of confusion about that between, you know, the liberals and the left. You know, what is the left? You know, what is a libertarian? What is a liberal? Like those kinds of things. So I just wanted to throw that in there because we talked about, you know, broadening the idea, or broadening the approach or the vision of how we're trying to solve these things.
Well, and who's going to be affected the most? If we want to build a broad-based movement that's truly diverse to build power as a real, vibrant anti-war movement, I think what we should understand is that in the context of global warming, in the context of neoliberal economic reforms, and in the context of increased militarism, the people who are going to be affected the most are women, people of color, people with disabilities. We see this in the combat zone, but then we also see it back home. You know, so yes, we're seeing in Iraq, who are the people who are most affected by the occupation? Religious minorities,
Yep.
ethnic minorities, women, children, the disabled, so on and so forth. And it's the same here now. You know, a lot of our veterans are coming back home,
Yeah.
many of whom are going back to communities that are just as ravaged as some of the third world nations that our veterans are coming back from, as you guys know.
which I think screams as we come to the end of the program here, which screams for that unity that is necessary, not in the left, but in the total community.
It's called
We're
I see it
talking
as
about the
identifying
99%.
yourself as working class as opposed to
Yeah.
middle class.
That
Middle class
is the definition
getting
of the
eliminated here.
99%.
I just want to remind you all that we've been sitting here for 2 shows talking with Vince Emmanuele from the Iraq Veterans Against the War, and he's on the board of IVAW.org.
Yeah.
He is part of the board of directors, and man, there is so much more information related to this that you can find on our website, and you can also fire any questions that you have across the table to us, across the bar to us. You can hop on our website and make a comment, and if you want to back that up and make sure that we get on and approve that comment in a timely fashion, you can send an email to info@revolutionandbeer.com. I'm Brian Murray, and this is WC Turk.
Turk.
And Vince Emmanuele, we are wrapping up in the Elbo Room.
Vince, thank you so much.
Thanks for
Guys,
having
here's
me.
to the holidays.
All
Cheers.
365 of them. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
And I'm just waiting for the catalyst. I'm waiting for the change, 'cause oh, it's gonna come. Yeah, it's gonna come. They've been saying it for years, for years and years and years, for years and years and years, and I'm so caught up on it. I'm so caught